What I like when I go back to a building where you've worked and designed is when people then come up to you and tell you how much they love coming to work and walking through the door. Because if a building gives them a sense that the people who have built it have loved it, the client and the commission, they feel valued, that means a hell of a lot. And that is something which comes out again and again, that people, when they're arriving, that they feel valued. And then when they're in the spaces, the one project I briefly showed there was a 1950s building which we transformed for a new purpose. That was the Baker Street project. There, we were able to argue and win the argument with the client that rather than knocking down, if you repurposed, you could get good natural daylight, you could get the ventilation which you get from 1950s buildings. And that had a huge impact again on people staying there, people wanting to be there. So I think it's fun. I think if I was in an office building, I want to have openable windows and I want to have daylight. And I think that's probably universal. So I think it's probably thinking about where you want to work and the environment that you want to work in.
Just to follow up on that, I think there's a real challenge with daylight. LEDs are now coming to the point where greater luminous efficiency coming out of a LED get from daylight. So I think I'm not saying let's all live underground in a concrete bunker, although some people quote me as saying that. But I think we need windows for views, definitely. But I think Australians, we tend to do daylighting quite badly in our buildings, and I think we end up with overheated buildings, sometimes freezing cold buildings. There's a building at our university with the whole wall is glass facing south, and it's 13 degrees in there in the winter. So I don't know. If we can't get it right, I'm going to just put LEDs and solar panels as forward as the daylighting solution. But there, I'm being a little more controversial.
In Australia, you see this kind of fridge lighting. You know, when you go inside buildings, and they often feel like they've got that overlit, very cold light, which is maybe to make them feel that they're cooler in a warm environment, but it's maybe being a little bit clever.
So can I just interrupt the feast of technology here? And you probably might find that a bit strange coming from me, since I have presented the robots to you, but I actually do not think that the technology is the answer. It's not even the problem. I think we need to start with humans. So if you're looking at sort of how do we think these spaces as workspaces, or for whom do we build and with whom do we actually work? I think we need to start looking at what our society at the moment does. And I think being in Australia, it's completely idiotic that we have all these singular houses, residential projects that are just, small isolated cells. Everybody has the garage, no matter how beautiful from a technological point of view. But it's really not the point. And we're talking about people who cannot, first home buyers who cannot get the houses, can't get into the market, right? So I would like to propose 3 different things that might be able to change how we think through community and spaces. So the first one would be, how can we invest together? That would be a Baugruppe. These are things that are existent in a German context. So you basically you buddy up with your best friends and you buy together as much as you can and build that apartment block. So share a block of land. The second one is, can we plan for multiple generations, please? Because you're not going to have your singular apartment, but you're going to have the family, and so do your customers. Yeah. So we're talking about changing life cycles that need to be catered and addressed for. And the third one is actually different workspaces, right? I mean, no one wants to sit at a table. I would like to sit at the table and then go to the cafeteria and then sit on a sofa and then hook up with someone and talk about a project that I have and then run into someone. But it's surely not going to be these cubicles of office spaces, etc., etc. And so if those are the concepts that are actually able to drive new spaces that we need to think about, then we can use technology in order to implement what we're actually doing. But if we don't have the concepts right, and I'm with you then on the side, let's really look at the problems. We're not going to develop the answers.
Hello. I'd like to pick up on two things I heard in that discussion. Your question was, what do people want? And I think there's two things that I've noticed in the last few years. The first is that what people want might be changing a little bit. If you look at WeWork, that's probably the biggest growing real estate company in the world, and people are starting to move, to work from home, or there's ho-working as well. I've meant something different to me. And there was also, so there's WeWork, there's ho-work, and that means that our environments when we come to the office are different, and people have different expectations, and that could be generational change as well. So that's one thing. And then the second thing was that what I've learnt is that people are smart, and we recognise that we have problems to solve. And my friend Alex there mentioned yesterday a good example of that is that people, if they know that their building is naturally ventilated, are happy to deal with a little bit warmer, temperature conditions inside. So I think maybe just don't underestimate the people that are in our buildings and the desire that they have to see a change in the way that they are designed and operated.
Go on, robots.
Sorry, can I just give the question back? Why would we want 3D printed buildings?
Oh, they offer a whole load of new architectural forms, they offer efficiencies with materials, reduced environmental footprints, there's a range of possibilities.
So there's a couple of things. We should actually have a coffee and talk about That's okay. Yeah. 3D printing is a great technology, but it's relative to the machine that you're operating with, which is why we haven't really seen that. So it's you need to have quite a big movement range if you take a robot in order to 3D print. That would be interesting if we are either repurposing materials that would go into wasteland. So we need to have new material strategies in order to look at what we are actually printing with. It's relative to how, if we want to go single cells, then of course we can 3D print possibly tomorrow. If you are interested in that, let's just start a little project together. So that's not really going to be the problem. But I think it's really, we need to look at the structure. We need to look at where we are printing. It would be interesting to print in remote locations. We need to develop the material characteristics, and then these work processes will be no problem at all. But again, as I said, let's look at sort of the larger challenges that we do have, rather than just having a big feast of.
Question for Alistair. You talked a lot about, Anne Austin from Lendlease. You talked a lot about panels, solar panels, PV panels. You didn't talk anything about any other sort of PV technology on glass, or were you just touched at the end of it and built into tiles? Is that, in your mind, fanciful nonsense, or is it going to be real? Is it going to take over panels? Are all those glass walls there going to be producing power fabulously soon?
Look, it's a very interesting question. When I started in photovoltaics was in the 1980s, just to be clear. But look, back then it was going to be amorphous silicon was going to be the next big material. Look, there's always new materials coming, and still we keep having crystalline silicon. 90% of the market, and has been for the last 30 years or more. Industry's grown 10,000 times since I've been involved over the last 30 years, so 10,000 times bigger. So anything that starts now has to grow by a factor of about 10,000 to catch crystalline silicon. So I think the challenge for any new material is getting integrated with what's happening now, which is crystalline silicon. There's colleagues of mine who will talk more about other materials, but it's a big challenge. It's the scale, and we're now doing 5% of Australia's electricity from rooftop solar, and it was 10,000 times smaller in 1980s. It's taken us that long to get to 5%. a long, hard road to make a dent. Lots of coal-fired power stations.
Like the VCR versus beta, like whichever one, VHS, whichever one, started off will be the winner.
Possibly. I think it's more like computer chips. If I visited a lab 25 years ago in Germany, and the guys there said, computers of the future will not be silicon. They will be material that we're working on. They will be liquid nitrogen cooled. They will have waveguides. They will have this, that, and the other. All sorts of wonderful things. And today, if you prise open, if you drop your phone and look inside when it's shattered, that's a silicon chip in there. Still, just getting bigger.
I think some of the things that we've heard today I would boil them down into two real points. One is around experiences. And I think what people, particularly in the space I work in now in office, where people are looking for experiences, we've seen it happen in retail, where you've moved away from food courts to the dining experience in a shopping centre. And why do people go shopping? They go for the experience. They don't go for, they get the shopping on the internet. They just actually go because there's an experience, that social interconnection, that social interaction with other people. And also, one question I'd like to ask you about is experiences. So what experiences in the future do you think we should be targeting or looking for, and why are they important? But then the second point I had was around language, and it came up, your talk at the very start about sustainability. At Mirvac, we deliberately left the name or the word sustainability out of our sustainability plan when we launched This Changes Everything 3 or 4 years ago. And I see that language has always been a problem when it comes to sustainability. And I'll give you another example from our work is that when you launch a zero carbon home, you get very limited interest. And we've actually just done a recent study where we asked people if they wanted solar, and we gave them 3 reasons for asking for solar. One was because they wanted to innovate, the second was because they wanted to save money, and the third one was because to save the environment. 0 respondents on saving the environment, no one was interested. What people were doing, and this comes to the point about press the buy button, people were not interested about that. They were interested, surprisingly to us, about innovation first. They wanted to be seen as innovators. Secondly was about saving money. But my second point there was that we launched a new idea called the House with No Bills. If we'd called it Zero Carbon Homes, we'd have got 0 interest. House with No Bills, 4 million hits on our website. People are really interested in saving money, and it's about the language you use. And to finish on that, recently I was talking to someone who works in Canada, and they've added a new part to their planning requirements around resilience. And they're saying that your building will get a resilience score, which means that if you lose all the power and all the energy in the building, it's naturally ventilated. So you can still open the windows and you can still survive in that building. It might be a little bit cold, might be a little bit hot, but it'll still be resilient. So, 2 questions. What experience do people want to see in the future? And the second one is, what language should we be using in the context of your work?
I mean, has the experience that people want, is it really changed? That is when you kind of we go to visit cities and places, and we're going to get a connection with people, that interchange, whether you're traveling on holiday or whether you're going to the market or whether you're just ordering a coffee here. I have a problem with these apps, for example, the new ones where you can order your coffee ahead of time and you just go there and you just pick it up. And I tried and I didn't like it because I wasn't engaging with the person who is making my coffee and that talk, and it just feels everything becomes impersonal, and then it will just be a computer there and you just take your coffee. So I've closed down the app because I thought, no, I want to have those connections again. And I know you can often sound like a Luddite and you feel kind of, maybe you're fighting against the trends, but then in our office where we've got a lot of the millennials and we're discussing it, they do say that they're feeling quite disconnected and quite lonely, and they're craving those connections as well. So I think we can't just say that people want to be separate. I think they do crave that connection with people.
I was going to say pretty much exactly that, but more eloquently. No, that's not true. When you started talking about experience, I was thinking, you're spot on. And the slide that I thought about the most was that one, this abominable survey that you did where we have all of the 5 things that matter in life, love, food, whatever it was, happiness, and then materialism. So I think, the hollowness that we're either all feeling or about to feel very soon, you could preempt that by focusing on the 5 things up the top that did matter. I can't remember what they were, but I just remember thinking, I really want to feel more happy and I don't want to buy any more. I'm sick of it. So I think that experience, any of those would be really good to focus on. And then what was your second question? I have to think about that one again.
I have another answer for you, maybe two answers to the 2 questions. I was interested in you talking about sort of language in terms of how we describe what these buildings actually are supposed to do. So what you call resilience is this sort of being able to operate under different circumstances, and these circumstances may change rapidly or they may change slowly. But I wanted to connect that to time. So we actually need to think about these concepts, these buildings and environments, building for the community, is taking all these different situations or scenarios into condition. And to produce something that is not the smallest common denominator, but that is of high quality, that has a sort of tactility to it, that has beautiful materials, and that has possibly formal typologies that can be readjusted. And you showed Hertzberger. Hermann Hertzberger has this wonderful concept of, I never know how to properly say it, polyvalence. So it basically means the interpretation throughout different conditions. So that would be one answer. I think we need to invest more in these sort of differently timed architectures. The second answer is, I think what people crave is, completely agreeing with your point, community. People crave other people. People crave exchange. And I think the second biggest driver is people want to be creative. And this is actually where I see the robots, because I see the robots as design tools. So in a way, to answer that question, yes, we can do 3D printing and we can 3D print big houses. But actually what the possibilities that we do have is to go beyond 3D printing with a MakerBot or with a CNC cutter towards advanced manufacturing that is not so much advanced, but that's really manufacturing. That enables us to produce stuff and to make makers communities. Decentralized, where you don't have to specialize and go to a big firm to do what the chair, do your own design for a chair or carpet or something like that. Yeah, but where you actually have these little work cells, industrial work cells in a future environment that would enable us all to basically be creative again and to design.
Take that further forward with the design and the individuality. Maybe that's a way in which you can get rid of the mass consumption of again and again and again and lots of cheap and that on products again and again we should just dispose of. There's some kind of
following on from that one too, in terms of community, I'm not advocating the single dwelling with the car, but that's all right. No, but one of my favourite cities in the world is Freiburg, which has a little quarter, the old French barracks, the Faubourg. And the great thing about Freiburg, from my feeling, is that it's a human scale city. No building is allowed. The Germans have great laws. Once you build the city a certain size, that's it. The city doesn't get any bigger. So all the green space stays on the edge of the city. Nothing's allowed to be bigger than the cathedral. And so all the buildings are low rise, community gardens in the Faubourg. The buildings are efficient. There are solar panels on the roof. Good public transport, cycles, shared gardens. Visited a friend there. Kids everywhere, kicking balls in the street. Or I could go to Beijing and see the high rise. Interesting though that the way the Chinese do it is they'll live in these very tall apartment buildings in, say, Beijing, but then of course there's the big open parks and space. So I think we need that connection to nature.
Buildings are a bit boring at the moment. So we've talked about all these fantastic potential futures, PVs, batteries, robotics, etc. Yeah, but the stuff that we still build is kind of boring, other than a few LEDs. what do you think the more stubborn problems are that we ought to be changing in?
That's a challenging question to do quickly. Off you go.
When you say boring, you mean not challenging, or you mean just a box, or do you mean efficient without having all the twiddly bits on? When you're saying...
I guess they haven't really changed that much. Like the facade behind you is still building the same range of years ago. But we have this technological basket, which is fantastic.
Well, do you not think it's kind of gone back a little? Because if you look at some of the Harry Seidler buildings here with the shading and the solidity, you think, yeah, that's a really good model to start moving and start developing and making a high-rise or a commercial building that is much more local. And then what seems to have happened, it seems to have gone back, and it's more dealing with models which are appropriate in other settings, but not here. So there's also, and that, so hopefully, you know, Australia and Sydney is now kind of moving beyond that, and so now that it can be more confident in developing something for itself, as it has done before. So, and I don't think you should just do twiddly bits or just do elements just for the sake of it, and if it's just kind of application, even though I quite enjoy it on some of our historical buildings. It was then part of a wider language about showing whether it's nation building or stability and those signifiers. So they were all doing other elements, and maybe these ones devoid of it are also saying that. I will shut up.
But I just want to say, I think we're in the best professions that exist, because we are building cities, we're building residences, we're building for people. So I think that's actually not boring. Sorry, Heiko. The other thing is, yeah, no, I know, but I think we can do more, we can do it better, and we can do it for less money, and I think we should start working on that.
So efficiency. That's, in the end, we'll all be living in bark huts if we don't get the carbon solved. So the driver for me is we need to solve that carbon problem.
Last year, developed a report with ClimateWorks called Low Carbon High Performance that highlighted the point that buildings contribute to about a quarter of Australia's emissions, are over half of Australia's electricity consumption, but that they also offer the lowest hanging fruit in terms of progressing sustainability. Determined that the technology, and most of you in the room already know this firsthand, the technology exists right now to deliver low carbon, high performance buildings. We're not like the steel industry or the aviation industry where we have to sometime in the future invent something new to allow this to happen, despite the fact that there is still progress to be made with renewable energy and batteries and so on. The technology exists today, and it's been proven by the highest end of the sector. The leaders in Australia are the leaders in the world. The latest results came out confirming this for the 7th year in a row, but we have a very, very long policy tail, a very, very long tail in the market. Residential and commercial, by large, are not progressing as fast as they should and as fast as they could, and we need government support to progress this. In our report, we highlighted 5 policy solutions to help to advance more sustainable buildings. The first was a national plan, prioritising at a national level zero carbon buildings, on the basis that we can do this, and on the basis that buildings contribute to a quarter of emissions, so we need to do this. There's already a national energy productivity plan looking at improving energy productivity by 40%. Buildings can deliver this, and we need to prioritise it. The second is raising minimum standards for buildings, for appliances and equipment, for existing buildings, and also for rental buildings. So one of the really fundamental pieces of work that we're doing at the moment focuses on the National Construction Code and on setting targets for new buildings into the future and a trajectory to get there. The code is upgraded every 3 years. Why shouldn't we, and why can't we set a target for where we want to end up with new buildings and how we're going to get there?
We have a regulatory mechanism that makes it really easy. So we're asking the government for a national plan, for higher minimum standards, for measures and for programs and incentives to enable market solutions, for energy market reform, to enable distributed generation, on-site renewables. Everyone would know that it's so difficult to actually get this rolling on site, and also the enabling measures, which includes data, information, research and education to help us innovate, to help us upskill and to deliver all of the rest of the vision that we have. So we are asking government to do this, but we need to be coordinated in our voice in doing so, and we need to help to inspire and influence and enable this to happen.